Hey guys, remember to like the video and hit subscribe. I'm worried I'm getting sick. I don't think I am. My throat is sorted out. If I get sick, I'm gonna be super grumpy. And I think I'm supposed to drive to Tampa tonight. Old video. What, did hydrogen change since the video came out? It became unstable? Unstable or unreactive? Uh-oh. Where the f is my other...
Outside of China, but if you take the...
Frozen salmon? Because at the time it sounded very...
I mean, they tested positive, and it tested positive in the warehouses also. So there is the China's, like... China could be lying about that because they want to maintain their zero COVID illusion or something, and they could say it has to come from somewhere outside of China. But if you take the evidence at face value, I mean, you know, if you believe it. But we do know it's spread out from the market.
But, well, I mean, I think this is an important point because if it was brought into the market by an infected patient and then radiated from the market, then it's this exactly same scenario as a lab leak versus, you know, a live...
Yeah, but you would have to show it getting to the market, which I still don't think we've demonstrated how that could have been possible. We don't even have like one coherent story for this, which is an issue.
Sorry, that's like this was the cases outside Infectivity.
And yep, I think, you know, Infectivity
on the market again, and then, you center them.
Kind of maybe just strengthening the idea that, you know, super spreading location would radiate.
Okay, wait. So I'd never heard this like Shinvadi or Zinvadi thing. Is the idea that there was some food that got shipped here with SARS-CoV-2 on it, and then there was another outbreak from Zinfadi? Is that what this is about? Shinfadi? The re-emerging outbreak of COVID-19 in Beijing, China in the summer of 2020 originated from a SARS-CoV-2 infested wholesale food market. Oh, okay. Oh, this was much later. Okay.
Like a market, like basically market being a perfect super spreading location, it would radiate, then yeah, you could have.
Right, because they have infected animal products that get shipped into them, and then they infect people.
Oh no.
Or human brought it into the market and infected people. It's not like.
But this is zero COVID in Beijing, so it makes sense that, like, you know, the source from outside of Beijing can ship the infected thing in, and then it spreads outside from the market. Whereas it doesn't make sense. Also, I think when we look at the phylogeny, we can actually see that this is frozen. Like the strain is an older strain from the thing that's currently circulating. So you can actually kind of prove that way.
Was it a European strain, like a strain circulating in Europe at the time?
Yeah, I actually have that, I think.
Like, I think regardless of that, I think it's still an example, like we can't differentiate between a lab leak bringing, like a frozen sample.
No, come on. No, that wasn't a serious statement. So now the lab leak theory is that a frozen sample was delivered in a safe manner from the lab to the Hunan wet market? No, come on. That's goofy.
Between a lab leak bringing, like a frozen sample into the market,
so
or an animal.
This is Shinfadi, and we have, these are like months of the samples, and so we're building, I think it's single polytomy, right, from single introduction.
I think he's saying lab leak doesn't exclude it. Well, no, but he played a little trick here. I don't want to convince him about faith, because like I said, I think this guy's done a decent job. Okay, but he played a little trick that I said before about how all the evidence can technically confirm your belief if you really wanted to. And he was saying, well, look, doesn't this super spreading event from a supermarket prove that markets are really good super spreader areas? Now, that's a little tricky because nobody's saying that the market isn't necessarily a good super spreader area. What they're saying is, did it originate from the wet market, right? But what Peter rightfully brings out is, yeah, it does show that a supermarket can be good at a good origination point and a super spreading point for something that gets shipped in on a product, which is exactly what happened, right? So the Xinfang thing, or I don't know what this is called. Oh, Xinfadi is an argument that markets can spread diseases, but this is an argument that really truly bolsters the zoonotic transfer because it came from a product in the market, people got sick and then spread it from there. Not that it was brought in by a human that didn't infect anybody outside and then all the infection started there, you know?
But then notice the months here, like it's these are May and then these are April. So it's more closely related to the April strains than it is to the May strains. So that's another piece of evidence saying it's a frozen sample because it's like a little bit, you know, behind of what's currently circulating in Europe or wherever it got shipped from. So that it,
but is it a
yeah,
European
you don't
frozen sample? Because it could have been just like some sort of delayed reinfection by a local person, and we wouldn't regardless.
Wait, what?
By a local, because it could have been just like some sort of delayed reinfection by a local person.
A delayed reinfection by a local person, but Beijing was on lockdown and there were no cases. No.
And we wouldn't regardless, if it was a frozen sample, I don't think it's similar to like an infected animal spreading it to multiple people. It's still like a single point, and the vendor selling this fish, getting sick, and then spreading it to the market. So I don't know if you can differentiate like this is how raccoon dog infection will be versus this is how lab leak super spreading by the market would be.
Sorry, I was looking for a slide.
Like, it's truly at this point, like any kind of lab leak hypothesis is truly unfalsifiable, because it seems like everything is obviously pointing to the wet market. But if we really want, we could kind of argue it all came from the lab first, but with absolutely zero reason to think so. Like, it could have come from literally anything. Like, it literally could have been an alien transmitted a virus to some dude in Beijing that happened to get out. Like, it's just, like, it feels like a, yeah, I don't know.
I wasn't listening for a second there.
Yeah, I was just saying that I think the example of the Infectivity market can basically serves that we can differentiate between a lab leak bringing a infection into the market and the market then amplifying it, and actual live animal bringing an infection to the market and the market then amplifying it.
How is that different, though? You know, it's a frozen infected product versus a live infected product coming into a market and then spreading.
No, I'm just saying that the pattern is the same. Like, if the market is amplifying things, the market kind of doesn't care. So you can't, using that pattern of like spread, the concentric spread, you can't make a dispositive argument that this must have come from zoonosis, basically.
But lots of things amplify. You know, there's super spreaders at, you know, churches and bars and restaurants and, you know, any crowded indoor place. You know, this is an argument in the first debate. Like, there's this mahjong room at the market, but there's also like 3,000 mahjong rooms or similar social places in Wuhan. So any of those could have been the first super spreader. Why did the, you know, lab virus go straight across town to the market and spread in that mahjong room?
What are the unfalsifiable claims for the zoonosis? The problem is it's not really the same thing. Like, all of the evidence points to zoonosis. We have to do a lot of mental work to make it come from the lab. There's no compelling reason to think that it came from the lab. That's our starting point. The starting point is that it just seems very obvious that it leaked from the wet market. So then it's like, okay, well, what can we build towards the lab leak hypothesis to kind of move us in that direction? What are examples or evidences that it could have come from the lab? And so far, there's nothing. We just have nothing.
It has a very nice split between like persistent population of vendors that can, and people going through it, and the vendors can, like, they always interact versus a church. You know, you get into this church for like a couple hours, and then you really need to have, I think, already a persistent virus to get amplified well by a church. But yeah, we're like, this is the conjecture land. Like, why is the market better? And of course, animals, like, again, like raccoon dogs, if they're so good at spreading SARS-2, having them in the market would be also a very good conduit for amplifying a lab leak virus that you bring to the market. Then, you know,
Raccoon dog.
Like, think about this. There's so many assumptions. So they brought a virus from the lab that then somebody lab leaked that virus into the raccoon dog in the wet market, and then in the dogs in the wet market, they managed to spread the virus to themselves enough so that it evolved to spill over twice in the like it's not impossible. None of this is impossible, but it's so unlikely at this point.
Dogs would amplify a lab leak?
But why wouldn't they? Like, if
Well, because then it has to be reverse zoonosis and then forward zoonosis again.
Yeah, like he's literally baked zoonosis now into the lab leak argument. Like, I think that it emerged from the wet market from an animal. I agree, but that animal was infected from the lab, and it's like, well, how do you know that? What's the proof of that? Oh, it could have happened. I mean, I guess. Do we have?
And like, and half of lab leak Twitter says they don't even believe raccoon dogs can be infected because like they don't shed enough virions, and now you have to throw out that argument just to.
Of the zoonosis, or 100% of zoonosis say raccoon dogs are the most likely source. So if raccoon dogs are so good, and we didn't even get the raccoon dog experiment. I have it. It was in the deck. There was only like 6 of 9 that got
sounds
infected.
interesting. What's this raccoon dog experiment? I'd like to hear it.
Oh, the raccoon dog experiment is they try to.
Do you want to share that or?
Ascertain. I can just speak to it.
Yeah, can you share a slide?
I mean,
He doesn't have a slide of it.
Or you can
I
just
would
describe it.
spend more time looking for that slide, I think. Just describe it. So yeah.
If it didn't come from a lab, how did it get to the wet market? Is it naturally occurring in some animals? Yeah, so these like types of coronaviruses go back and forth between a lot of different animal populations. Now, I say these types of coronaviruses do, but this particular one, we haven't discovered the exact ancestor for. We found some in animals that it wasn't the RATG13 one. There was another one that was found that wasn't even close to like 98% or 99% match or something. But we haven't found the exact one yet. But these types of viruses circulate a ton. That's why researchers at the Wuhan Institute of Virology go out to these caves and everything, and then they sample animals and they bring them back and they sequence the genomes and everything else.
Basically, they try to ascertain how good are raccoon dogs at spreading SARS-CoV-2 and they did an infectivity experiment, kind of like the ferrets with the H5N1 all the way back, the original gain of function study. Basically, they got a bunch of raccoon dogs, and they tried to, like in adjacent cages, they had like 9 raccoon dogs, and I think in every cage they infected 1, and they had 2 other ones, if I remember correctly. And then they used, I think, a very high titer of the virus to infect.
Oh, it might have been the banal 52 or whatever.
Raccoon dogs, and only 6 of the 9 raccoon dogs actually got sick, and they had like 9 raccoon dogs, and I think in every cage they infected 1, and they had 2 other ones, if I remember correctly. And then they used, I think, a very high titer of the virus to infect raccoon dogs, and only 6 of the 9 raccoon dogs actually got sick, and also they had like a 10,000 or 100,000 lower titer than seen in human infections. And also, they actually used a later strain. They used a strain with that D614G mutation to do these experiments versus like the earliest strain that would have been circulating in the Wuhan or the animal reservoir. So it's still kind of not conclusive.
I feel like the stronger but insufficient anti-market zoonosis argument would be the unlikelihood of transferring an animal to the wet market with no one getting infected along the way, and it just then mutating to jump to humans, and that the intelligence community finds me of stronger information we're not privy to. So Peter gave an argument to that I thought was actually kind of compelling, that it could have evolved like either at the wet market or directly before the wet market to become very infectious to humans. But it also could be that the first cases of COVID actually happened in people that were involved in this wet market animal trade, but we don't have those first cases because those people would never go to the hospital. Because if they get sick doing dumb shit like this, they know that it's not a good look, and they know that they're going to get their ass, chewed out or arrested or disappeared or whatever. So that those initial cases of like animal handlers or people involved directly in that trade, who hopefully are also like masking up and hopefully being masking up, probably not, but hopefully being a little bit more cognizant of like, okay, well, if we all get infected, we're fucked. I don't know what those people's precautions normally look like, but that the first cases theoretically could have emerged from those people, and we would have never seen them go to the hospital because they know that if they're sick with some novel shit, it's not good. They're going to get fucked up for it. I feel like one thing that reinforces this, I'd have to double check Peter's source, although at this point I have no reason to doubt him. The fact that when the WHO was taking pictures in the wet market, and the Chinese government had removed the animal wet market food character from the signs, I thought that was very funny. Now, does it speak strongly to anything? Like, I wouldn't on its own use that as evidence, but like that is pretty funny that they.
But they just ordered a search.
That they went far enough to like where they were obviously embarrassed or wouldn't want anybody to know.
Market, because he knew that those were infected by the first SARS virus, and those are dangerous species to sell. And then after COVID started, he noticed that those pictures were taken in the same shop. I translated the signs. This is 6th Street. This is the same shop numbers. And when you look at the positive samples, all those elements are in the same photo. There's 2 positive carts. There's 2 carts in his photo. There's a feather remover machine. The raccoon dogs are sitting on top of birds in a cage. The sewage outside the shop tested positive. If you look at the raccoon dog cage, it's sitting right on top of the sewage grates. There's drainage in front of each of these shops, but that's not drainage for the bathrooms. That's like you wash whatever waste comes out of the shop and it goes down this trough. And when you look at where they tested these drains, and then the dog shop,
I think I didn't closely
once they were see the and
oh fuck, he didn't even point out the sign changing.
Look at all the structure that those were he played on just comparing early cases to the 2 places.
WHO. I wonder if it was in the back and forth one, maybe. Oh.
This is outside of the Mahjong room. It's that window right there while they're disinfecting the market. And I actually found something interesting. There's a sign on the wall, and there's a character that got removed from the sign. So I translated that. It's this Ding Shang blank Wei wholesale store, and the missing character is probably Ye. It's Ye Wei. It's a wild taste. It's a term for eating wild animals. And they took down this character elsewhere in the market because they didn't want to admit that they were selling wild animals. So the Mahjong room literally has the answer written on the outside of it. And when they go in the WHO report, we have another picture of it, and they've taken the sign down entirely at that point. I mean, I'm not 100% saying that proves anything, but I found that interesting. I think the logic is more absurd for this, like, theory. There's millions of bathrooms in Wuhan. Why is it the bathroom in the market that matters? It's the wild animals in the market.
I don't know, I thought that was funny.
That raccoon dogs are all that good at first of all, transmitting the virus among themselves, and they didn't get like visible signs of being sick. So in terms of like how much virus were they shedding, and was it enough to infect humans? I think.
Do you find this experiment, which is much less exciting than I was expecting from the words raccoon dog experiment, do you find this experiment like persuasive in thinking that this means that raccoon dog could not have been an intermediary step in a zoonotic transmission, or are you happy
Go to Johnny Harris reading the lab leak? No, but maybe we can after.
to be ambivalent about the experiment having any meaning or some things?
That's for Yuri.
That's a question for you.
Oh, for me? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought.
Yeah, like, are you persuaded by this experiment? Or is it just something someone did and maybe they messed up?
No, I'm not persuaded at all. Yeah, I don't think we have strong evidence that raccoon dogs are good at transmitting the virus, like the actual live virus, because we didn't even try. Even with the later version, the more infectious version of the strain, that was like 3 times more effective. If you remember the Mark Eluar experiments, where they used actually like to try to see the difference between the original D614 strain versus a G614 strain. So there was a 3-fold difference in infectivity. So even with the
But
latest,
what I'm asking is, are you persuaded from this experiment that they're bad at it? Because, like, do you think this means raccoon dogs cannot be an intermediary host?
no, I don't think that completely rules out
Okay.
the idea, but I think it weakens this notion that raccoons.
Well, but they are really good for amplifying a lab leak. They're just not very good at spreading a natural virus. I think that's what we've established.
No, I mean, if this is the conjecture, or no, if this is the point you make, that raccoon dogs were very good at transmitting the virus and they brought the virus to the market, that under this very same kind of prior of raccoon dog being so good at transmitting the virus, they could also be very good at amplifying a virus brought in to the market external.
But they're equally good as humans, or assume they're equally good as humans, and now you have 10 million people in Wuhan plus 100 raccoon dogs or 40 raccoon dogs or whatever it is. And why is that extra 40 any different than 40 more humans?
Well,
Like it just doesn't make sense. So one human brought this infection, and they fucked, I guess, a raccoon dog and infected him, and then all those raccoon dogs started to infect everybody from the wet market. But that one person that infected the raccoon dog didn't infect anybody else or anything else or anywhere else, or like how? It doesn't make any sense.
I guess if you have all the vendors kind of representing raccoon dogs, and humans are, I think, better at transmitting the virus, but
There's just no way.
if you have
Like, it doesn't make any sense. So it was easily infectious from human to raccoon dog from the lab. I don't know. But then the raccoon dog evolved. Like, it's just no way. There's no shot. There's no
I guess
shot.
infected raccoon dogs at the market,
No.
you couldn't make an inference whether they were infected just by seeing, like, again, collocation of raccoon dog mitochondrial DNA and positive samples from that stall. You couldn't infer whether they were the original animals who brought the virus to the market, or if it was infected raccoon dogs, whether they were infected in the market rather than they were infected outside the market.
I think we came up to this question in the last debate. Like, how many patients do you think there were before the market outbreak?
How many patients there were where?
COVID cases in Wuhan or the world or whatever. You think, like, there's this big outbreak before the market. How many cases were in Wuhan before the market outbreak?
I have no idea. Like, you're asking me based on the current observations. Well, I mean, first of all, we
You
don't.
have to be able to model this. We have formulas for calculating, like, spread of disease and everything else. Like, there are answers that are acceptable that you can justify mathematically, and then there are unacceptable answers. Like, you can't say, for instance, COVID was probably in existence like 6 months to a year beforehand. It would have spread way more. You're talking about like singular transmission from person to person until at some magical point in time that would just be highly implausible. And then there are other examples like, I think the first case was a month ago in a lab or whatever, a month earlier than we knew. And then it's like, okay, that's more justifiable. Yeah.
Don't even know. Like, we haven't sampled enough early cases to conclusively say, like, we have a huge confidence interval. Even for the kind of spillover date, like the Warby models, it's like put it between October and November. So with such a wide interval.
But they also built a model of like how many cumulative cases there could have been based on that genetic diversity. Because like we agree there's such low genetic diversity, and that means either it's a lab leak that just happened or like we just caught the spillover. Like it hasn't been hanging out for 6 months. So have you thought about like
sure
how many lab cases there were before the market?
Not 6 months. Well, I mean, we don't even know how many market cases there were. We just have kind of those 16 patients in the hospital. How many were asymptomatic? How many?
Was asymptomatic carry common for the very first version of the coronavirus. I don't think that was incredibly common at that point, no? I wonder, are there numbers on that, like percentage of, I don't know if I can find it, for the before it evolved into anything else, before Delta and Omicron and everything.
He were symptomatic but didn't go to the hospital. I don't know. I mean, at this point, this is just useless speculation.
No, come on. It's useless to speculate that there could have been 10,000 asymptomatic cases. No.
Same.
Or do you have a guess for like when the lab leak
Dozens.
happened? Have you thought about that?
Like, this is what I mean. I hope Peter does this more in either this or the next 3, where they wrap everything up. You need to have a coherent and consistent start to finish lab leak theory. It can't be that they are occupying all lab leak theories simultaneously. It needs to be one consistent theory from start to finish, because a lot of these lab leaks are mutually exclusive.
Pause. I just accidentally reset the time
Pause.
for you, Peter. I think you were at 20 minutes. You guys?
Yeah, you can take 11 off. I don't care as much as Sarah about the equal.
It was close to that. I apologize.
He
That's
doesn't
my
give a
mistake.
fuck.
It's hard to switch this thing.
It's going to be merciful when the timer hits 0. So don't.
Sorry.
Where were we?
Yeah, well, I don't know, like in terms of cases, and in terms of the data, the lab leak probably, and yeah, if it's like cryptic transmission, it could go on for pretty much, for weeks, if not months before it blows up.
No, what? Does cryptic transmission refer to asymptomatic transferring to asymptomatic? Is that what that means? When we say cryptic, how are we defining that? Okay, I think that is what it is, okay. Asymptomatic was common. No, I'm asking percentages, because like, I thought that the first version of coronavirus was the shittiest one to have. Like, if 20 to 40% of people were symptomatic, and I don't mean like hospitalized, but I mean symptomatic. I feel like over 50% of people to the first strain were symptomatic, meaning you had a cough, a fever, or something. I don't think 50% were even asymptomatic, no? Eat fresh, guys. Yeah, because if we're gonna say like cryptic asymptomatic to asymptomatic transmission over and over and over again, at that point, like it literally could have leaked from that North Carolina lab. Like there might even be you might even be able to make a better lab leak theory, since that lab was more directly involved in the research that would have created a virus like this, right? You could say, well, it leaked from the North Carolina lab, asymptomatic to asymptomatic spreader, and then finally the first case evolved or became symptomatic, or something happened at the web market. Like it could come from almost anywhere, right?
Right? No, I don't know.
I don't think that's true,
October,
and I think
November,
that
well, and also, yeah, in terms of like mutations, if it had any prior mutations that were like made it less transmissible, which we just have no idea about. I don't know, but
Can I use this point to ask a question to focus it? I've talked a lot, so Eric, if you want the first crack, I want to switch.
You want to move on?
Can I just say something? I'm actually just going to fill in the time here for a sec before you guys get to it, because we talked a lot about this at the first debate. Like I presented this exponential model, and I said like you can't have 1,000 cases in Wuhan, because if you did, you'd have too many deaths by the time the lockdown happens.
Exactly, and they would be spreading from there. You don't have 1,000 cases one month, and then 1,000 cases the next month, and then 1,000 cases the next month. It would explode in terms of infectivity. There would be way more people infected, and there are predictable numbers that we can see for hospitalizations and people dying. And so we have excess deaths to measure this. You're going to have your early, what's the name? Your blood samples and everything that you could go back and test. Like, there's just no way.
I'm not going to repeat that again. You can watch the debate again. But I looked into this a little more, and you've got this. Another thing I've learned is that COVID transmission is overdispersed, is what we say. It's not like you say R naught equals 2.5 or whatever. So that means average person infects 2.5 other people. But it's not actually each person infects 2.5. It's like most people infect 0. These are some guesses on the COVID parameters. Most people infect 65% of people infect nobody. And then a few people infect, one person. But then there's this long tail of people that super spread. And so this is like, this is what you expect it looks like, where it's like everybody infects 2 to 3, but it's actually this different distribution, this negative binomial. And so there are interesting things you can understand about this. Like it can spread faster than you think at the beginning. That's the orange line, versus like the red is what you expect from the Poisson, I think, because it can super spread right at the beginning. But this also explains like why it goes extinct so often, and why like this can't spread outside of a city. Like if it spreads on a farm, it's going to be that case where it just goes extinct right away. And so the way that it does spread is like either it goes from the raccoon dog to the person and it just stops after that, or it goes from the raccoon dog to the person and you get the like mini super spreader that starts that exponential chain. And that's like why the Picard-2 spillovers make sense, like because like 2 of those stuck and the others didn't stick. But this is why like it's just floating around. It came from the lab and it's going one person to one person to one person until it finally hits the market where it has the perfect conditions to spread. That's really unlikely with this kind of model, because one transmission with no super spreaders just doesn't sustain COVID. You need a super spreader somewhere pretty fast. And if it's the lab, like the first super spreader is probably going to be at the lab, and all the smiling people at the dinner table are all sick already. I mean, maybe that's why they're out to dinner, because they all know they're immune already. But if it's not the lab, like there's so many other places it could be they could go to, like their favorite restaurant, or another market that's closer to the lab, because there's like a bigger market that's on the same side of town, or a supermarket or a restaurant or whatever. So that's like, it has to hit the market and hit this first super spreader like within the first 20 cases or whatever. So even if the market does have these perfect conditions with the resident population and the mahjong room and all this stuff, even if for some reason it did spread the virus better, it's still unlikely that the first person before it goes extinct or super spreads is going to reach the market. And this is just an interesting model that explains a lot of things. Like it maybe explains why Japan succeeded with COVID, because they went after clusters rather than our like stupid lockdowns where like you shouldn't talk to your friends. But you could still, go to a sports game or whatever. And then it explains why it starts in a big city. And again, it explains why you can't really get this like stuttering person-to-person transmission. A yield.
Yuri, did you want to respond there?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's also, there are plausible scenarios under the lab leak where it could have been, it went extinct a few times from, people infected in the lab. But of course, the lab was this persistent infecting, space that infected either novel people or reinfected people. And then they actually met that lucky super spreader that eventually.
So now we're having multiple lab leaks over and over and over again, and then finally one happened, but none of them were,
caused it to spread. So it's just very hard to speculate on the exact number of patients early and the exact dynamics before it could have been amplified by the seafood market. So, yeah.
I don't know. We don't know, but just like every time you have a lab leak, there's the chance of that super spreader at the lab and all these other places. So even if you're like, there's multiple lab leaks, I don't know if that makes it more likely that it's, and I still don't see why the market's like this perfect place in town that's the only place COVID can spread. Maybe we can talk about that more with Sar in week 3, because that was his idea more than yours. Maybe let's just talk to the judges about their questions instead.
I want to know if the two of you want to talk about in glycan at all. Maybe, yeah. That was my question.
I already talked about it. You guys have questions about it.
Okay.
I mean, you did talk about it, so I guess I'm asking Peter if you wanted to give a response to Yuri's claims about Inconsistency.
I mean, I sent you guys a written response already. I can read that on the screen if you guys want. I think it's probably Texas sharpshooter fallacy, because there's like 22 different N glycans that it can be, right? It's not just there's these 2 mutations within the SARS virus, the original SARS virus, and it was the, let's see, the 227 and 699. Yeah, I got those right. And so if they had manipulated those 2 sites here, like I could see a stronger case for it, because that's the ones they'd be interested in.
So our lockdowns were dog shit in the US. Yeah, our lockdowns were super dog shit. It was super inconsistent from place to place. Sometimes it seemed like they didn't make very much sense. I don't think we had very good, I don't think we had very consistent or good lockdown procedures at all. I think it was kind of retarded.
But then it's actually this like 370 site. And then I looked over all the sarbecoviruses, and that site does vary. It's about 10% of the other sarbecoviruses have a mutation there. So it's possible. But also, you might say, okay, 10% chance it's natural, 90% it's a lab leak. But that one is not special, because there's all these different papers that say like 370 is important, 330 is important, or here's like 7 different sites that are all important. So you can make a theory for every one of these. And also the DEFUSE grant says they're going to remove glycans, and they're also going to add glycans. So you have 2 different theories there. So the odds that you're going to get one of those theories positive, especially, we also know that these change if it does jump species. So maybe that's just a sign that it jumps species.
Wouldn't the people at the lab visit the markets often? Am I missing something? Not necessarily, no. And I don't think I've never seen proof that any of them frequent the wet markets ever. Maybe it is out there and I just haven't seen it, but it wasn't brought up by anybody here.
I think it's the same with like the FAO-I site that we were looking at. There's like 3,000 different restriction sites. I sent some slides about that also. Yuri's found this one that's significant in the FCS, but like he found the FAO-1, but here's like every other restriction site I found there. So why is that one important and not the others?
This is a bad diagram. They use 4 nucleotide long, and that's ridiculous. The Panchin and Tishkovsky, that paper. But
Yeah. Well, and they said, you said it has to be like 5, and then, they said if it's any one, it's 99.5%, but if it's a longer one, it's still 50%. You're going to find one. And then you found two papers that worked with this, and I wrote it down while you were talking. It's like, it's not coronaviruses. It's just really, it's like a salmonella experiment, and then like a strawberry model virus. So like, yeah, maybe the strawberry model virus people were working with Xi Jinping, but maybe you just found a pattern and then you tried to explain the pattern.
Well, no, I just found this particular site in this particular insertion, and this is the hypothesis I formed, and it could have been just, by coincidence that it arose in the insertion, or if it wasn't a coincidence, this is why it could have been used. And I guess for the glycan, it's the same thing. Yes, I mean, obviously anything can also be natural. It could have lost the glycan naturally. It's just this coincidences keep building up that, it's the same glycan as the DEFUSE cited in connection to this DC sign binding with the macrophages. And they were interested in a whole bunch of glycans. So yeah, it's not like they had to zero in on one particular one. It could have been one of many that they manipulated. And it just happened that this one really helped with the infectivity of human cells, and that's why this particular strain maybe jumped out and infected someone in the lab. But
But it's also like they're gonna make all. If you imagine they're doing diffuse, they're making all these different viruses, and you're imagining they make every experiment all at once. So like they could have made the WIV1 backbone with this special RBD, and that would have leaked first because it's good enough. And then they put in the furin cleavage site, and then they put in the N glycans, and none of those leaked until they did every experiment at the same time. So you're imagining this huge body of work that's happened before any one of them leaked.
Nothing has to leak. I mean, they're supposed to not leak, right? They're doing these experiments.
Yeah.
Well, but it has to leak to be a lab leak, right?
I'd like to focus on that. That's where one of my questions was about this, is the sequence of events in terms of this mutation, Yuri. So how does in the lab leak scenario, how does the strain that leaks end up with the ablated glycosylation site and the FCS inserted? Is it one then the other? They do them at the same time in the experiment? How does that look?
Yeah, probably if they had a virus in which they inserted the furin cleavage site, they could also, in other experiments, see that this glycan is the one that really increases infectivity, and then they try to combine them to create like the mother of all coronaviruses, the most infection variant. Like they say in the DEFUSE proposal that they're going to have a mix of
Like, how could they do, I don't know if this, but how could they do all this experimentation and not come up with a G614 mutation, though, right? Which evolved incredibly early on in a single generation. It might, like, there's just no way. It doesn't make any sense, no?
the mutations in the quasi-species to see how they affect jumping from species to species. So they could infer each of these things impact on infectivity separately, and then they can combine them, like that polymutant virus that I mentioned in the Omicron connection, where they combined all the mutations into one strain and showed like, oh, look how good this is at infecting humans. This could have been similar inspiration for them to do in the context of diffuse-like research. Okay, let's try to see what's the most dangerous virus that can emerge from that cave through some sort of natural evolution or jumping into some intermediate hosts, and and then have the potential to be really bad for human. That's my.
Shall I ask a follow-up on that?
As long as we're on here, I just wanted to know what Yuri thinks of his former coworkers' current theories. Do you have a preference on 4T-Trick versus the Wuhan Institute of Virology, or?
It's a loaded question because you probably seen the tweets, so you know my opinion,
right? I don't remember your response there. Sorry.
I don't think Valley or 4D-Trick. I don't think Valley is COVID. That vaping disease, I don't think it's COVID, and I don't think 4D-Trick played any role in COVID.
So I'm looking at the diffuse proposal. In the very beginning, it talks about, we'll sequence, blah, 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 insert them into that SARS-related coronavirus, WIV1, SCH14 backbones. And it says, these are not SARS and are exempt from dual use and gain-of-function concerns. And I'm just sort of wondering, Yuri, if you had any comments, because as we discussed before, obviously the diffuse proposal is not a blueprint that everyone followed identically in nobody's theories thinks that happened. But it sounds to me like the authors of this proposal are aware of the potential of a risk of creating dangerous virus. They're talking about using a virus that they think will not be infectious in using a backbone they think will be not infectious in humans. I guess clearly something happened differently from their intention of not doing something dangerous and the theorized lab leak. And so just want to understand your perspective on how is it they did something dangerous by accident when, clearly they're aware of the need for safety of some capacity.
Yeah, no, that passage about them being exempt.
And I don't just mean lab safety in terms of like they have to wear masks, but also just general idea of don't do something dangerous. But sorry.
Yeah. So, but no, like that passage in DEFUSE, it's essentially just like a cover your ass passage to alert DARPA that this is not like gain of function research under the pause for gain of function research, because yeah, they had some exemptions that like bad coronaviruses, they can be worked and they didn't constitute this the P3CO, like the dangerous pathogens gain of function research that was kind of banned. And of course, yeah, they basically said that we can do this research in our BSL-3 labs, and the fact that it's safe because it's, I guess, bat strains, and it's not exactly SARS-1. I think under some gain of function...
557 pages. Yeah, we saw the White House thing, or not, I shouldn't say White House. I think this was a, was this the House Republican losers for their paper? But the issue is, and this is, my guess is if, as we go through the government statements on this, my guess is going to be that all of them are like this. Like some intelligence agencies have decided to just say that we think that it came because of a laboratory-related accident, but they offer no proof or evidence of that whatsoever. They just like say it. And there's no like analysis of the scientific literature. There's no new evidence even that's given. They don't even claim we know it because of some top secret stuff that we can't share. They just like say it, and it's kind of retarded. So I don't know what I'm supposed to make of that. Unless this one is different. Is this the same one we read before, or is this a different one we read? 4 years after the onset of the worst pandemic in 100 years, the weight of the evidence increasingly supports the lab leak hypothesis. Select subcommittee can work. More and more senior intelligence officials, politicians, okay, so none of that matters. State Department published an unclassified fact sheet entitled Fact Sheet Activity of the Winter. Okay, let's see. The U.S. government is reason to believe that several researchers inside the WAV became sick in autumn of 2019 before the first identified case of the outbreak. We read some of this. Autumn, fall, that's a massive red flag. The month here is essential. And if you are vague on the month here, you don't even deserve to be in this conversation. Because leaking it at like the beginning of the season versus the end, we're talking about like months of time here where it would have been impossible that this virus was active for 3 months and nobody knew about it. That's just an absurdly stupid thing. Like it violates every single model. It violates every single real life leak we've seen. Every single real life spreading event is just stupid. Before the first identified case of the outbreak, with symptoms consistent with both COVID-19 and common seasonal illness. Actually, wait, hold on. I don't think I'm reading a single section more of this, if I remember this correctly. Did they cut out the entire part where they said there were also people who were sick with things that were symptoms that had nothing to do with COVID? Did they cut that whole part out? 1 second. Wait, is this the same one or is it a different PDF? Fact sheet activity, January 15, 2021. What? This is referencing something else. We read the original PDF on this. I'm trying to remember what it was. What did we read? Oh, I think it might have been this. This was June 2023. So it would have been after that other thing. Because this says that they took blood samples for the people that were sick and none of them matched SARS-CoV-2 at all. From anybody that did get sick, we have no indication that any of these researchers were hospitalized because of the symptoms consistent with COVID-19. One researcher may have been hospitalized in that time frame for treatment of a non-respiratory medical condition. While several WIV researchers fell mildly ill in the fall of 2019, they experienced a range of symptoms consistent with colds or allergies, with accompanying symptoms typically not associated with COVID-19, and some of them were confirmed to have been sick with other illnesses unrelated to COVID-19. While some of these researchers had historically conducted research in animal respiratory viruses, we are unable to confirm if any of them handled live viruses in the work they performed prior to falling ill. Like this is known. This is just a lie. The way that the information is presented here is a lie. If you were to read this, it looks like people were sick in the fall of 2019 with COVID, but they don't mention here that some people were tested and they explicitly weren't COVID, and everybody's blood was tested. Like I positively identified some diseases weren't COVID, and two. They weren't able to find any tested blood that had SARS-CoV-2 antibodies at all, and they went back and they checked. So they make it sound like here, before the first identified case of the outbreak, with symptoms consistent with both COVID-19 and common seasonal illness, this is misleading at best and just an outright lie at worst. And then this is all speculative. Some WIV researchers probably did not use adequate biosafety precautions at least some of the time prior to the pandemic and handling SARS like coronaviruses. Like, what is that statement? Some WIV researchers probably did not use adequate biosafety precautions at least some of the, like, this is retarded. This Dr. Redfield guy is fucking retarded. We've listened to some of his testimony in Congress. Like, this statement right here is incorrect and it's a lie. The fact that because SARS-CoV-2 possesses a furin cleavage site found in none of the other 871 known members of its viral family, so there are other. There aren't there are not SARS-CoV viruses that possess the furin cleavage site, but plenty of other coronaviruses possess furin cleavage sites that evolve in all sorts of areas. So him saying it cannot have gained such a site through the ordinary evolutionary swaps of genetic material within a family, this is a lie. This is just not true. I don't know why I'm reading this. This House Republicans, it's literally not even worth. Anything that is produced by the House of Representatives in the United States for the past decade is not worth reading. I think or if you want to do if you want to know something, then you can read the House report and then study everything referenced in the House report. That's a good way to learn stuff. But I wouldn't trust a single thing that comes out of. Next, in 2018, a year before the outbreak, EcoHealth, in partnership with the WIV and a grant application to DARPA, proposed to create a virus with SARS-CoV-2's defining features. In their application to DARPA, EcoHealth and its WIV partners stated their intent to create a SARS-like virus with a furin cleavage site, which is the exact same feature that made humans susceptible to COVID-19 infection. There were other things as well, but also they don't mention here that the grant was rejected, but okay. Okay. Yeah, we might go through some government reports after, but I guess it's all going to be like slop written by boomers that unfortunately live too long now. So we have to deal with them still in society. But maybe some other government report has something that has something of substance in it anywhere. But
Definitions like SARS-1 was not. You couldn't even do the experiments with SARS-1. I think in UNC you had to do BSL-3 plus for SARS-1, but bad coronaviruses you could do. And the same thing in Wuhan. They actually allowed them to work under BSL-2 on bad coronaviruses, but SARS-1 was...
They did the same thing in the United States as well. You can go and check the current CDC website. The idea that this has to be in a BSL-4 lab is retarded. This is even for SARS-CoV-2, not even one. But SARS-CoV-2 in animals can be worked with at in a BSL-2 lab. At a minimum, BSL-2 facilities, practices, and procedures are recommended for diagnostic research, anatomic pathology, environmental testing, and virus propagation utilizing SARS-CoV-2.
A higher level of biosafety. Sorry, yeah. So yeah, but yeah, I'm sure they recognize that if they splice in a spike that has good affinity to a human receptor, there's always possibility of it spilling out. They wouldn't spell it in the grant, I guess. We're going to create pandemic pathogens.
So when Peter said that it would be standard practice for many people in this field to work with pseudoviruses that could never leak, is my understanding, in this way, you're saying that presumably they'd be aware of this technique of using pseudoviruses and they chose not to use it because it's not appropriate for their research goals or something like that.
Yeah, and they felt safe enough using chimeric SARS viruses because it's going to be done in the WIV. This is repeated twice, and it'll stay in China. The US will be safe. WIV will do the live virus work. But yeah, they could have done the pseudovirus work, but of course it's very limited. Pathogenicity in mice. So chimeric viruses was their first step, and of course those are live actual viruses.
Okay, maybe.
Could that all have happened? Sure, but every single step of this is speculative. There's no evidence whatsoever, unless we're going to assume that they carried on all the work from that rejected DEFUSE proposal that the North Carolina Institute was more equipped to carry out, and they didn't publish any of it. And then it's too much.
Those questions?
Yeah, I think I'm running out of questions, and certainly out of brain power. But this is an important one that I think for Peter, I think I kind of want to understand what the chain of transmission is in your model, like how the zoonotic outbreak works. And I think it's been sharpened a little bit by what's happened in this debate, because it seems like if the raccoon dog is not actually very good at transmitting, I'm not saying that we've agreed on that or anything like that, but if it's not very good at transmitting, and we all agree that the virus couldn't have been circulating for very long, what does it look like? It seems like it has to get out of its animal host pretty fast into the intermediate, and then pretty fast then into humans to both not pick up diagnostic mutations or mutations that we would see and spread in the pattern we have. Is that a fair characterization? An unfair? Speak to that.
I don't know that it transmits poorly in raccoon dogs. It transmitted to 6 out of 9 of the animals, and that was good enough. And also they weren't very sick, so that could actually be a plus for maybe they wouldn't transmit or traffic the animals if they were visibly sick. And also that experiment showed no characteristic mutations like they had with the mink or whatever. So it confirmed in my mind they're one of the plausible hosts. Though, I'm saying it's 99+% that it's the market, but I'm not saying it's 99+% that it's the raccoon dog. I think we need to do more experiments on those animals to figure out which animals are most likely. Sorry, I'm running out of brain power too. What was the next step?
That's where I want to go. So
it doesn't have to be really good transmission. It just needs to be good enough to transmit to people.
But for the overdispersed, the overdispersed nature of transmission events, I think that's what I'm trying to figure out is presumably there's a bat in the wild that has this under zoonosis
Yeah.
is consistently getting out of that bat into an intermediate host, perhaps raccoon dog, perhaps something else, and
Yeah.
then those are continuously not spreading it. One makes it to the market and then gets one, like, and then is one of the, randomly rolls a 20 spread there. Is that
Yeah.
the
Yes, something like that, and it does that twice at the market, and it does it like nowhere else that we know of. But I mean, I think I put this in my supplemental slides last time. Like, it's hard to compare SARS and COVID because they shut down the country with SARS.
just in terms of sequencing evidence or in terms of intermediate sequencing evidence kind of thing?
Like, because Yuri and Sarbo said the same thing, where it's like, why is SARS in so many different towns? And sorry,
Yeah, I know what you're talking. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you looked through all my slides last time, and
Yeah, this is the question of shutdown and like which samples were actually sequenced, which were not, and like where could you actually have seen the spread given the lockdowns?
yeah, I'll pull it up if I have time, but it's like, if you shut down the country in 2 months, and if you shut down the country in 2 months for SARS, it's only going to hit 2 towns. And if you shut down the country for COVID, it's only going to hit 1 town. So there wouldn't be enough time for either of them. Railway might actually, yeah, okay. Here's what I was looking for. So this was, Yuri's diagram, and he's like, why is SARS in all these different towns, and why is COVID only in one place? Well, so if you mark the market closed and the Wuhan lockdown onto SARS, you've got like 2 cities and then barely 3 and 4, and during that time, like, COVID spread all over China because it's just such a more exponential disease, such a more.
What are your percent chance you're giving to the lab leak side being correct because of no education or knowledge in pharma relative to their level of intricacy? Like 5 to 10%? I think it's less than 1%. The problem is that, like, there's just not very, I don't know if anybody credible is arguing lab leak at all. It's not fair to say that you shouldn't believe something just because of who's on that side. But I mean, I think it is fair to infer a little bit. If every single person like supporting a particular theory also happens to be like an anti-vaxxer, believes that supplements can cure diseases, believes in homeopathy and chiropractic, and is constantly dodging from one explanation from some bullshit to another explanation. When you're running into this type of stuff over and over again, and it's like consistently on one side of the argument, and everybody that's coming out to support this is like some crackpot 1 in a million standing against the whole, and they're supporting other things that have been proven false. At some point, it hurts the credibility of your argument. It really does. So I mean. But it's not, that wouldn't be enough on its own, and it's not a strong indicator that you're right or wrong, but it does hurt a bit.
Transmissive disease, and like, if there was another spillover 6 weeks later, I don't even know if you'd see it because it'd just be lost in this noise. Like, there's not another spillover at the same time as Wuhan, and maybe if we didn't close China, you'd eventually have another spillover. But because it was shut down, you really can't compare those two fairly. Well, yeah, you'd also see, if you sample those cases, you could see it was different also, but they didn't sample in like rural China, and then they shut down the whole country, and then they killed all the animals on their farms. So it would be hard to find, and it's a hard comparison to make between those two.
Some evidence that would speak to this is presumably there are earlier abortive transmission cases or it is likely that this is not the first time this is transmitted to humans under your.
Yeah, maybe on a farm or somewhere, and maybe if you really search all over China, it would have been really good to do it back in zero COVID, because you could look for antibodies on those farms and you could see, but now you can't tell because everybody in China and everybody in the world has had COVID, so you can't find that signal. It would be great to look at Chinese fur farms too. They never did that. They never looked at their big raccoon dog farms in the north. There has been one fur farm in all of China in all of the world that did get infected. I wondered about that for a while. Because if raccoon dog's not the right host, it is the right host, then like, why don't they get infected in the wild? And I looked over all the reports, and there was one Polish raccoon dog farm in 2021 that did get infected. And then there's mink farms all over. And so you'd think a mink is a better host, but then I also found the ratio, 99% of these fur farms are mink farms in Europe, and only 1% are raccoon dog farms. So the base rate is going to be higher. So it can infect raccoon dogs, and I bet it's infected raccoon dogs on Chinese farms. They just won't tell you because China's opinion is COVID didn't start in China.
Yeah, that's another thing that's annoying as well. And I don't know if lab leakers ever addressed that. People are like, well, of course, China's going to try to cover this up if it leaked from a lab. And it's like, yeah, but China will also have a massive motivation to cover it up if it leaked from a wet market. Like, that maybe potentially even more so, just because of how like humiliating and embarrassing that is. Leaking from a lab is humiliating and embarrassing because there were like not proper procedures were being followed, and people might blame you for it. But the wet market leak is in some ways like an indictment on like an inferior culture, right? Like, you guys are still eating captured animals in these disgusting areas that are now hurting the whole world. Like, that's internationally, I think that would be humiliating for your culture and your people. So like, they have just as much of an incentive, if not more, to cover up an actual zoonotic transmission as they would any lab leak one.
I thought of a few other things we need to talk about. We didn't talk about intermediates. We didn't talk about, just going through my slides. This is just one random thing I pulled up from Yuri's tweets. Like, he's
Jesus,
looking
the tweets.
at the centroid, and he's saying the centroid is close to the Wuhan CDC. So this is like a lab leak thing where if closeness if closeness points to something they like, it's important. But if closeness points to the market, they say that's not important. It's not really a big issue, but like
out in retort to the zoonosis theory, because it's zoonosis makes a claim its importance. So I'm just showing that it's more close to the CDC.
But what do you mean more close to the CDC? It's close to the.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's the CDC,
another random thing I wanted.
Truther.
Yeah, another random thing I want to point out is their argument really relies on a clean insertion of the foreign cleavage site as being so weird. And one thing I came up with during the research is COVID has a proofreading mechanism for mutations, which influenza doesn't have. So like when you culture them, influenza mutates 23 times faster than SARS-CoV-2 in the cell culture. And I think this is probably also true in the wild. I didn't compare the exact number there. But the proofreading mechanism doesn't work for insertions and deletions. So this could be one of the reasons why everybody looks at this and says, "Oh wow, why is there a clean insertion there and no mutations on each side?" Like it filters out some of those and not the insertions. I don't know if this is the answer, but that's one thing the lab leak side might have missed.
But assuming this is true, would that explain the graph that, or how is that consistent with the graph that Yuri showed, in which observationally many of the mutations one sees in people with COVID years on, how insertions are extremely rare?
I don't know how that fits in, and I'd have to think more about that. I mean, he also showed, like, he went through the end of Benal 52 and showed, like, this is the only insertion, and why are there others? And so it's both the rate of mutations, but it's also the rate of evolution. So, like, the spike protein has a function, and you can't necessarily just throw big chunks into it in certain places and have it work as well. But maybe if you do throw in the cleavage site by random, then that actually works really well, so maybe that gets favored.
Yuri, was there a reason it was only the last 1/3? Is the rest of that the ORF region? Is that the part you didn't show, or?
No, just more convenient. Yeah, starting with the spike, everything towards the
It's
end.
just you didn't want to do 15 slides of nucleotides. I appreciate that. I was sort of curious,
I'm not even sure I needed all of the whole genome alignment. And actually, I think Peter had a nice diagram of insertion frequency, and I think he said it's in the spike. A lot of the insertions are in the spike, but most of them in the spike are like in the first third. And there's only very few around the S1, S2 junction, like around the fusion cleavage site. So it's actually,
Yeah, we're in agreement. There's more in the N-terminal domain. So yeah.
And even outside the spike, even more in like the subsequent genes in that later, like after the spike, the later fifth of the genome. So just very odd to see an insertion here.
This is one other thing I want to just read into the record here. This is an interesting thing. There's this SRA is like single read archive, I think, where they put the metagenomic stuff. That's how, like, when you find the raccoon dog samples, there's sampling for COVID, but they also find animals in the reads. And so they have this archive of all these reads around the whole world. And somebody did a search early in the pandemic, like, did anyone find cryptic COVID anywhere in the world in this archive? And they couldn't find any. So that's another way we can determine that, like, it probably wasn't floating around for a long time before it showed up at the market.
So I guess he's saying they didn't find which samples, the Antarctic soil samples?
So this is just like related to the Antarctic soil samples that you're talking about. That's like one way.
Their methodology sucked.
These came in later. He looked he looked before. He looked April 2020, and these are later. So
it's hard to
prove.
know about the Antarctic soil samples.
This is just like another Jesse Bloom thing where they like found something that looked really suspicious and it had ProCov2 cases in it, but it was actually just late. It was like February cases that had ProCov2, which I think is a reversion. So I don't think it, like, if they could prove that these were really like November or December, it would be like a smoking gun. But and they also had they had signs that they were actually later.
But they sequenced
samples.
it in like December 2019. So how could they have been later?
I don't think it was December. I think it was like January 30th, and it also wasn't in Wuhan. It was in like Shenzhen, I think.
That's an important
I think it was even the
factual
wrong
disagreement.
city.
Have to talk about that.
Yeah. The only other important thing I had to talk about is the intermediates, which we haven't gotten into today. Did Yuri want to go over his theory of those first, or should I just go into mine?
Go ahead. And if you have any questions, I can weigh in.
Yeah. So I mean, that's intermediates would disprove Picard's hypothesis. So those are a lot of people point to those. So I can find my slides for those. So he ruled them out in a lot of different ways. Sorry. Oh, yeah, intermediate. So there were like 800.
Off topic, but for RNA virus like COVID, why would it want to have any proofreading capacity? I'm not biologically inclined enough to know, but intuitively I'd have thought being more easily mutatable would be better for something simple like a virus. Well, if you consider that the vast majority of mutations are detrimental to something surviving, then having more mutations doesn't necessarily make it better off for you. There's probably some careful balance between having a lot of mutations if you produce a lot of a virus, or if it's highly infectious can be good. Having too many can make the virus just not like probabilistically transmissible enough. Like if you were to have a genome for a virus that the RNA proofreading was so bad or something and it mutated 99% of the time, then as the cells are producing this virus, that's been hijacked by whatever virus insertion, it might be that there's so little infectious material escaping that people don't even develop a disease, and the virus cell dies out pretty quickly, right? So it just depends on the thing, I guess. It probably depends on a lot of factors: the complexity, what part is mutating, and everything else.
A or B genomes at the beginning, and then there were 20 that were CC or TT, which are the intermediates between those two. And Picard ruled them out to say it's two spillovers, and there's been a lot of speculation that this was fraudulent or done in bad faith or whatever. And so it does seem like from my perspective, he did this correctly. Like the work checks out. I looked into some of them. So some of these have just like super low sequencing depth at those positions, like less than 10 reads. He produced the examples on some.
What sequencing depth means?
Again, that's like where you sequence and you chop up the DNA into all these like 300 base long reads, and then you reassemble it into a genome.
It just means a low signal. Is that the...
Yeah, but it's a different signal across each base. So there's 30,000 bases for COVID, but you get a different amount of reads at each spot. And sometimes you get, like in these samples, we're looking at the one site and they're finding thousands of reads. And the reads are mostly, even then they're like indeterminate, but they're mostly T's. But then in the other spot, they're finding like really low signals and they're not, yeah. So you can rule some of them out that way. And then there was another case, this was in Sichuan, where they used the software that says if you didn't sequence the position, you have 0 reads for that spot. It just uses the default, which is the like Lineage B Wuhan Hu 1. So it fills in the default there. And then if you only sequence half of it, you can make an intermediate because you only sequenced half. And so Picard talked to the author there and confirmed that's what was going wrong with those. And then the other case he found was that some of these had like multiple rare mutations shared with other Lineage A's. So then you can tell that those are either like convergent evolution intermediates or misreads, because it's just extremely unlikely that they're going to share all the other mutations with those. And then there's this paper from Yuri and Alex Washburn and Steve.
Wait, is it sub about to get banned? What, Magic Dragon 212 just said, MFG, Jerome Powell resigned. Dude, you're lying. You're going by old stuff reporter earlier that he is considering it, theoretically. Okay.
Even Stephen Massey, where they said they found a bunch of other intermediates that
Should ban you.
that were like, should have been included in Picard, but they like all came from Sichuan. So it's the same problem, the same software. A few were from Wuhan, but I looked those up in GIS-AID, and they were also, the Wuhan ones were processed in the same Sichuan university. So it's the same lab. So it's like exactly the same issue that Picard already flagged and talked to the author about. But then they wrote this paper saying, Picard's a fraud. He ignored these ones, but they're the same genomes. And this all got pointed out on the paper they wrote. There's even a funny way in which like Massey, he screwed up the font on one of these samples. It's different than the rest in his table, and it's actually a duplicate sample that included what Picard already did. So it's like, did he just change that number in the table? And hard to say. And the other funny thing is like only CC or TT can be the intermediate. It can't be both of them. But Drastic just like cites both of those to cover their bases and say it's like doubly fraudulent. Yeah, that's all I had on intermediates.
Okay. Did you want to comment on intermediates at all?
Sure. Yeah. Well,
If not, I have questions.
Sorry.
I mean, if you want to talk about something else, I have other questions. So.
No, I mean, yeah, in terms of intermediates, the Wuhan genomes, I didn't realize they were sequenced in the same way as the other ones that filled in were the consensus genomes. If they weren't sequenced, I have to revisit the paper. And we look at both intermediates.
Not to derail or anything, but is there a chance at all for Lab Leak at this point? I mean, maybe there's something outside of this. I'll probably look at a couple of their videos and government announcements. But it doesn't seem like there could be a scientific or inferred probability argument for it. But there could be like let's say there's some intelligence agency that realizes that a researcher under direction from the Chinese government pocketed a virus and then intentionally leaked it to the wet market. Like something like that could be 100% consistent with all the scientific evidence and everything.
And either ones, like if you want to throw out all the CC ones, but TT ones are legit,
But it just sucks because I'm pretty sure the majority of Americans believe that the lab leak stuff, I think, is true. Probably, maybe majority of people in the world, but pretty sure the majority of Americans believe in this shit. And I mean, I guess the majority of Americans also believe that Epstein was killed. So what are you going to do?
You still have to take into account the TT ones. That's why we looked at both. And just in terms of, we were questioning the methodology of Picard throwing them out. But in terms of the details of which ones are legitimately thrown out and which ones should not have been thrown out, I need to go back to the paper and kind of respond to those points of criticism. It's been a while, and some of them I didn't even see because they have, those authors have me blocked on Twitter. So. But if you have other questions, feel free.
So following up on this, if I understand correctly, you're claiming that most likely Lineage A is ancestral to Lineage B, right?
At least phylogenetically, yeah. I mean, to think that it came from a reversion. Sorry?
I mean,
well, it could still be like, no, like B could be ancestral and A could have resulted from like double reversions to the consensus, but Peter says that's extremely unlikely, and I agree. So
so you're not. Hang on. Okay, well, I'll get to the question I was getting to, which is, I believe you talked about saying that there are cases of people who had a virus you think is ancestral even to Lineage A, and therefore also ancestral to Lineage B. And I just kind of wanted to understand, like, the context. Who are these people? Where did they get sick? When did they get sick? Did I understand what your claim was correctly?
Sure, yeah. Well, I would need to revisit all of the genomes, but I think Peter had a diagram with actual sampling dates. And basically the question goes again to, are those really ancestral genomes, or are those mutations or reversions to the kind of the ancestral variant? And Peter's claiming those are all reversions. And I think at least some of them actually do represent true ancestral genomes. And of course, if we sample them later, I think it still doesn't mean that that mutation arose later. It could be like that lineage was.
100K big enough incentive for you to debate Yuri on some other Bayesian case study. Yeah, 100K. I debate for free. I would debate on anything like that. But it would just be my confidence in the scariest thing for debates for me for a subject like this would be judges. That would literally be like 95% of my worry, basically.
Kind of circulating undetected, and we only sampled its kind of descendants later on. But based on the phylogeny, if you kind of don't trust the sampling dates to give you the inference of what preceded what, based on the phylogeny, we see a lot of genomes that have these mutations that are ancestral. And to think they're all reversions, I mean, that's one argument you can make, and Peter made it. I would need to revisit the exact diagrams of his analysis because he did some of his own modeling. I mean, it's
this Yuri guy seems like a smug prick. At least I was polite. Really? I feel like I don't think he's been smug at all. I feel like he's been like a pretty normal person.
interesting to see the actual number of reversions in both lineage A and lineage B and make that determination. But, sorry, I guess now I've got 3 minutes left. Did I answer the question, or you have maybe some follow-up?
I mean, I'm not sure I fully understood.
Okay.
But I mean,
if I can briefly rebut, like I was saying that it's hard for this to circulate, cryptically because of the whole overdispersed transmission, and that's why it's the single polytomy, and that's sort of true for every strain. So if ProCov2 was the ancestor, you should have a single polytomy for ProCov2, and it's really hard for that to circulate. And also, sorry, just consistency of the theory too. Like this accountant Chen guy who's over near the lab, like if he was ProCov2, like that would maybe be really interesting because it would point in multiple directions towards the lab. But he's lineage B, but with no mutation, so he's like downstream of the lab genetically. He's exactly equal to the strain at the lab. So either he infected the market, or downstream of the market. So either he infected the market, or the market infected him. And I think the market infected him.
I don't know. I think unless Will has something, we might be near the end.
There's obviously incredible density here. I think I'll have a large number of follow-up questions that I think I have to work out what each of you have said, and then understand which questions I should ask. And I apologize, I should have done a better job beforehand, but there is a truly massive amount of information. So it's super, super cool. It's wonderful. I just think my questions at this point will be stupid until I put pen and paper.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's best to answer questions in a written form because sometimes, especially after a few hours of debating or speaking, your brain process is going down.
We're at 7.5, so.
Oh, wow. No wonder. Yes, I'm definitely feeling a bit sluggish at this point.
Okay, should we have a last, if you guys, Peter, do you want to say 20 seconds and SAR 330, or are you guys good with what's been said?
I'm good. I have a headache.
Yeah, already took it out.
You're welcome to ask for more questions. I think there are no stupid questions, Will. I think there are stupid people, but not stupid questions.
I'll do both.
Sure. No, I mean, yeah, I think it was very, very interesting, definitely. And I think
Don't you think it's kind of sus they were researching this in a lab nearby? I mean, it's a lab that's nearby, like a whole bunch of places where they could run to sample, like similar viruses from populations of animals that, like, exhibit these viruses. So no.
in general, this topic is lacking in this civilized debate, and I think there's people on both sides who are to blame on dragging this to the gutter sometimes. But I mean, I'm all for figuring out the origin, even if the origin turns out to be zoonosis, and the lab is not to blame, which we can all be wrong, and I was wrong several times and throughout my life, many more times, and I think we have to keep an open mind to.
Yeah, the reason why I haven't talked about the ruling for the judges much yet is because, and we'll watch these, but the issue is that, so they have there's 3 more sections to this debate. No more 3-hour videos though, okay? The other 3 are an hour and a half long. But the issue is that in this third video, for the last 30 minutes, Peter, and I don't know if he did this as part of his debate or if he had prior training in this, Peter just draws this huge soy jack of the SAR guy, and then he just has the judges stare at it for 30 minutes. And then after that, they're like, well, I mean, he depicted him as a soy jack. Like, obviously, the other guys lost the debate. And I don't know, I'm not very satisfied by that ending.
Being wrong and just examine the evidence, and as much as possible to be not emotionless, like not make emotional. But it's very hard, of course, after especially like you've invested a lot of time in your reputation. But at least I try very hard to be objective. So if there is objective evidence that comes out through these discussions or later on, probably, I mean, because these things have been debated for so many years now that it's unlikely there'd be like a dispositive, convincing argument made on existing evidence. But maybe something will come out later on as well that will kind of be dispositive. So, I mean, with that in mind, I think existing evidence for me is more convincing as a lab leak, but I guess for Peter it's more convincing as a zoonosis. So I guess maybe it takes impartial judges that kind of haven't been exposed to all the bad factors on both sides, haven't been exposed to all of the manipulations, that can make a decision on like what at this point is the most convincing case. So I think I'm rambling on, and with that, thank you.
There's a lot of groupthink on both sides, and I agree that like if I'm wrong, I would like to know why I'm wrong. And I think like you're blocked by the scientists, and I'm blocked by your colleagues, and it's hard to have a civil discussion about this, and it's hard to. There's no place to peer review. Like the car erratum, like somebody found a bug in his code, and it's corrected now. But like the lab leak, it's decentralized. So where if I think parts of it are wrong, who do I complain to? So only thing I could think of is gamble $100,000 and yell at people for 3 weeks straight.
Well, I think both have an exemplary job, and there's few people who know more about it or who are committed to like producing high quality evidence. So it's cool to see it.
Yeah, and I
thank you,
enjoyed
Gary
it very much, and would love to see this evidence. Kind of collated to maybe like a written form where you can examine. I think some of the modeling that Peter did would be really interesting too.
We'll release all our slides, and I think win, lose, or draw. I think we'll make some things that people can look at and learn more about this, and that'll have some value. And I don't know.
Okay, I'm gonna stop this recording, and then we can do just logistics for next week.
Oh, this was all on
Same
record.
time tomorrow?
Damn.
Jeez. Okay. I was expecting this one to be the rough one for Peter, but I feel like he flew through this one incredibly easily. The SAR guy, I think, is deeply unserious. The Yuri guy had way more subject matter knowledge. And then there's just these 3, I guess. So summarizing both sides, and then judges' questions for the last one. I wonder if I'll go through this one today.
Okay, welcome back, everyone.
But Star comes back for this one, so Jesus. Somebody said that they made a post on their subreddit now about the root claim people did. I'm curious, what was that subreddit post? Sar says the debate didn't change his mind. In fact, by the end of the debate, root claim released an updated analysis that placed an even higher probability on lab leak than when they started. No, I saw the blog thing. I'm curious about the subreddit post though. Oh, that's what you were talking about? Okay. If root claim / SAR Wolf loses the 100K challenge on COVID origins, will there be a sore loser? Oh, somebody made part 1, opening arguments. Civil debate between people who understand likelihoods on the animal origin versus lab leak theories of COVID-19. 2 impartial judges, 200K, staked by both sides. Well, it's 100K, right? But, oh, he corrects it, yeah, okay. Jesus, okay, don't need that. In that thread, Peter Miller is arguing in the comments, and this is his reg account. Oh, shit. You're being viewed on Kick? Oh, finally. I paid for those a year ago, and it's taken them so long to kick in. I'm just kidding. The FBI guy that's watching me, I know you. Johnny Harris made a video on this, he said, but this is 4 years old. So there's a ton of research and stuff that he hasn't. So my guess is he's just going to be going over basically all the common shit at the time, no?
Discord as a live stage theory that was brewing under the surface. One that many experts didn't talk about publicly at the time, but they thought about. They were thinking of another building jumping from animals. Instead, Wuhan's relationship to coronaviruses isn't that it's common that it breaks out in wet markets. No, it's because of the lab. The lab is the world's largest sample of coronaviruses on Earth. Now, let's be clear, this isn't hard proof that anything happened. This is circumstantial, but it is absolutely a firm foundation for a hypothesis that potentially this could have come from the lab. That woman herself, that was her first thought. And as I've been reading accounts from other virologists and epidemiologists around the world who heard of a virus coming out of Wuhan, they thought about the lab. They're like, oh shit, there's a giant lab there.
You have to be careful about that, though, because all of these viruses, or at least most of them, the vast majority of them, are cataloged. Like if the lab is holding viruses, then a lot of the genomes are sequenced partially or completely. And so then we would know absolutely, right?
Tons of viruses. I wonder if it came from there. Now listen, this lady who we're calling Batwoman, the bat expert, went to the lab as soon as she got to Wuhan. She was sort of freaking out. She had been losing sleep, and she looked at all of the data, all of the samples, and determined that none of the samples, engineered or natural, were the same as COVID-19. None of them were an exact match. And she sighed a breath of relief, and she felt like, okay, it wasn't our lab. For most scientists, that was enough proof to put the lab leak hypothesis to rest. They're like, oh yeah, Batwoman said that none of the samples were identical to COVID-19. But for many others, trusting this one woman to tell us the truth or to have done a thorough investigation is not good enough evidence for us to rule this out. The world, who has suffered greatly because of COVID-19, deserves a chance to truly investigate, not trust one Chinese researcher.
The world has reached another grim milestone in the history of the coronavirus pandemic.
This is globally. The death toll has now topped a staggering 3 million people.
But for some reason, China is not really playing ball with letting an inquiry or an investigation happen. When Australia got up and called for a transparent investigation into COVID's origins, including looking into the lab leak hypothesis, China immediately retaliated with economic sanctions on Australian products like wine and beef. What? A little defensive? Like, wouldn't China want to have an independent investigation into this hypothesis so that if it's false, it can be proven false and we can put it to rest?
No, not at all. Like I said before, it emerging from a wet market is arguably more humiliating. What? Like,
seems like that would be in their interest, and yet they're making it incredibly difficult for anyone to do an investigation. Instead, we have to rely on US spies and intel to piece this together. The Wall Street Journal recently reported that there was intel that said that 3 researchers at the Wuhan lab got sick with COVID-like symptoms and had to be hospitalized.
like this is all bullshit, right? Like
In November 2019, weeks before the first official case of COVID. Again, this isn't proof, but it's
it
definitely
was over the fall, not in November exactly. And some were COVID-like, some weren't. And people that had confirmed diseases weren't COVID. And somebody was there for a totally unrelated, non-respiratory thing.
reason to ask more questions. China, stop making us rely on intel from spies. Put the hypothesis to bed and let us investigate. But they won't, which is incredibly suspicious.
Mike, at the end of the day, it's profoundly in China's interest to do this as well, because look, it suffered too.
Okay, so that's the lab leak hypothesis. Unsafe lab that's the coronavirus epicenter and it engineers viruses to be more infectious for humans, has a little mishap, which turns into a global pandemic. It's a feasible hypothesis that deserves investigation. Now listen, if your brain is anything like my brain, what both of our brains are doing right now is scheming to find some sort of certainty. We're like, oh, look at all this evidence here. They were in the hospital and Wuhan is actually the epicenter. And we're piecing it all together. Our brains love to do this, to lay out the circumstances and fill in the blanks so that we can believe in some sort of certain thing. Our brains hate ambiguity, but please don't be tricked by your hate for ambiguity.
It's been debunked that this virus was man-made or modified.
A major reason for that was because there was the Trump administration that was constantly overstating the hypothesis, claiming they had way more evidence than they actually did, labeling it the China virus.
The Chinese virus.
It's not racist at all, no, not at all. It comes from China.
Which helped fuel a spike in discrimination and violence against people of East Asian descent. And then Tom Cotton gets up and says this.
The virus went into that food market before it came out of that food market. So we don't know where it originated, but we do know that we have to get to the bottom of that. We also know that just a few miles away from that food market is China's only biosafety level 4 super laboratory that researches human infectious diseases.
Oh, well, this is awkward. Yeah. It turns out...
Wait, so something I'm kind of curious about. So I'm sympathetic towards naming schemes now that don't call out necessarily... they don't call out an origination point for a variety of reasons. I think that's fair. So it's like SARS is severe acute respiratory virus. Nope, that's not true. It's severe acute respiratory SARS. Acute respiratory syndrome. Jesus. No, not syndrome. Is it syndrome? It's syndrome. Okay. Yes. Severe acute respiratory syndrome. Okay. Coronavirus 2. But why I guess they don't retroactively rename viruses because MERS, MERS, stands for Middle Eastern Respiratory Virus, right? That's not named for symptoms. That has Middle East built into the name. After all this research, it is certain it's coming from China, though, lab leak or not. Oh, absolutely. It absolutely came from China. I don't think I've seen any serious contention that it came from somewhere else. Now, I think China somehow tries to maintain that it came from the United States, but I haven't seen anything that suggests it comes from not China.
We're here for the third and potentially final debate. I think Peter to speak first today for 90 minutes. Peter, what time signals do you want, if any?
Oh, give me I don't know, 45, 30 left, 15, 10, 5, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Doesn't have to be exact. I haven't given this one for time yet, so I have no idea how long this takes, and maybe I can go through it pretty quick. I don't know.
I'm going to want to spend a lot of time on this slide in particular.
Okay. So shall we start? All right. So, we've had a long, complicated debate already. We've come to agreement on a few things, like we don't think the 3 sick researchers of the Wuhan Institute can be trusted because that's an anonymous government source. I think we agreed it's normal for pandemics to start in big cities. I thought we agreed on a September lab leak being impossible, though it looks like Yuri's maybe backpedaled a little on that. Even in Yuri's latest model, it says the leak would be September 27th. So this Wuhan database going offline back on September 12th, we can conclude that's not important. And there are a bunch of little things we don't agree on, like the exact odds of Wuhan. We agree it's at least 1.5% that a pandemic's going to start there, but I think it's higher than that. It's a factor of 2, factor of 3, whatever. We don't really need to argue too much when we have much bigger disagreements. We disagree on where the 2003 SARS pandemic started. I mean, the truth is science doesn't know. It could have been Hubei, it could have been Yunnan. 20 years later, we don't know exactly how SARS started, and we're still trying to figure out SARS too. And then there's these disagreements that are really important that we need to talk about today. I think it's very unlikely that a lab leak would go across town and show up at the Huanan market and nowhere else. Raccoon thinks that's a certain thing to happen. They give that no weight in their analysis. They think it's a 100% chance. I think the Lineage A and Lineage B evidence points towards the market. They disagree. I think the evidence in the market points to some infected animals, and I don't think the lab had any secret viruses. So you need to put a probability on that. Raccoon thinks there's about a 20% chance that the Wuhan lab created SARS-CoV-2. I think that's much, much lower, not just because they didn't have a secret virus, but because we don't even know if they did the DEFUSE grant. That wasn't supposed to be in Wuhan. and they don't have, normally their experiments would be a different backbone, a lot of other reasons. And then there are a handful of things that like I think we agreed on, but I'm still not sure. I think we agreed that the first cluster of cases is at Huanan. I think we agreed that it's normal for the cases to spread out from a market if it starts at a market, because that happened at Infectivity. I thought we agreed that the data has no serious bias issues.
How long ago was the debate we're watching? About a year ago, January of 2024.
Question that's centered, but I don't know. And I think the only lab leak scenario that fits is just someone going straight from the lab to the market. But this is also, worth discussing. I think this is hard because the thing I'm arguing against keeps changing. In the first week we had all these claims. The first guy was December 8th, but he was actually not December 8th. There was this claim that the first two cases were visitors, but that wasn't correct. We had this claim that there were lots of early cases outside the market, these claims about bias that couldn't be proven. And, it's a lot of work to go through and debunk each one of these. It's easy to make a claim, to claim it's biased, but it takes a lot of work to prove that it's not biased. And I think where we got to is that it's a likely place for a cluster to start. This is just kind of a graphical representation of how this argument goes. So these were some of the first claims. Like we talked about, the first case wasn't December 8th, he was 16th. 4 out of 5 of the first cases worked there. One was a repeat visitor. We went through the early hospital data to show that most of the cases were from the market before there was any possibility of bias. Infectivity proves that the centering argument is true. That's just how market outbreaks work. The Mahjong room, we found that there's like 3,000 Mahjong rooms in Wuhan, so that's probably not an important detail. And then, is it a likely place for it to start? We also, in the first debate, I also point out the centering, but I also point out that it's the center of the pandemic genetically also, that, these red cases are the earliest genomes of Lineage B and Lineage A, and those both are at the market or very near the market. I said it's about 1 in 10,000 chance that it would go from the lab to the market and nowhere else. One reason for that would be because there's 1,000 people working at the market and there's 10 million in Wuhan. That gives you your 1 in 10,000 odds. The other way I did it was with this Sina visitor system data, which compares all the places in Wuhan, and if you divide it by the total traffic, that's also about 1 in 10,000. That's a long list of places, 1,600 different places. And so even among supermarkets and shopping malls, if you restrict it to that category, Huanan market doesn't stand out. There are 70 of those supermarkets and shopping malls and other wet markets that are more popular than Huanan in this data set. I mapped out all these places from the data. Every one of these red pins is one of those spots, and this is the Wuhan lab, and this is the Huanan market. So there's a lot of other places it could go. And, obviously there's going to be restaurants and lots of other places you could put on this map too. The Warby paper tried to filter these down. They tried to categorize.
Just for an exact distance, can I find, what is the distance from Wuhan Institute of Virology map? Because that one guy tried to say they're next to each other or they're a mile from each other. A mile is stupid, I think, because the Empire State Building is a mile, or what, maybe a mile and a half to Central Park. But I mean, you would never say, oh, look how close they are. There's no, there's a lot of people in between the Empire State Building and Central Park. So it's kind of a stupid claim, but I'm just curious if we can find out what is the distance in miles. The travel distance is supposedly 30 minutes. Oh, some people are saying 8 miles. Okay, Wuhan Institute of Virology to, what's the name of the wet market? Oh, Huanan Market. Can I just say that? Is it Huanan Seafood Market? Oh, it is. Okay, so about a 30-minute drive with no traffic, and the distance is 20 kilometers, which is about 12 and a half miles. Okay.
Which of these locations are most likely for super spreading based on size and other factors? They filtered it down to colleges, shopping malls, hospitals, bars, convenience stores, churches, temples. All these are places that have had super spreading events in other countries. And if you do it that way, it's actually 1 in 2,500. We talked about ventilation last time, that maybe the ventilation is bad in the market. And I looked for some pictures of it, and I noticed that this is every street going into the market has an open archway. And there are 20 plus archways like this. So there's a bunch of open holes in the wall of the building, which is not something you get at a restaurant or a supermarket. I think that actually argues for maybe better ventilation. The corridors aren't super narrow. Depends. There's different sizes of streets at different parts in the market. Inside each shop, obviously, that's a tight airspace. But I don't know why it would spread from one shop to another. We looked at this in the first debate. These chess and mahjong rooms, there's lots of these around town. The one at the market is just this tiny little closet. It's not a place that outsiders would go. You could definitely get some social transmission here once it does start at the market, but the odds that some random person from the lab is going to come here are pretty low, or extremely low. It's probably lower than 1 in 10,000. It's just a large shopping area. I made a map at scale. This is a Walmart supercenter in my city compared to the market. So the Huanan market's smaller than a Walmart. If you combine the west side and the east side, maybe it's about the same, maybe slightly larger. traffic, it's probably similar. Some people say the market gets 10,000 people per day. I'm not exactly sure if that's right, but Walmart gets like 10,000 per day. Huanan's not even the biggest wet market in Wuhan. There's this other market, Baishoju, which has about 6 times as many shops, and it's also closer to the Wuhan lab. It's on the same side of the river. So the difference is that Huanan market had wildlife. We have this Zhao Zhao paper, which went and did tick sampling on all the wild animals being sold at these markets, and he found 17 shops across 4 markets. Huanan market had the largest number of those shops. And the bigger market, Baishoju, only had 2 of those.
Damn.
Another thing we could do is we could look at other countries, look around the world and see where super spreading happened. So you have like choir events, you have big church outbreaks. I looked up as many papers as I could find on this. This is a Korean study from 2021. They found sports academies, karaoke centers, and schools were all good for super spreading. This was Korean from 2020. They found the biggest was a church group, but they also had workplaces, schools, leisure facilities, nursing homes. They did list markets here as one of the 7 parts of leisure facilities, but they didn't break down that more finely. This also spread on ships. It spread on nursing homes around the world. Those are all good super spreading cases. It's a Hong Kong study. They found it was bars, weddings, and temples. This is a U.S. study that did New York and Seattle. They found sporting events, museums, and grocery stores. French study, they found it was colleges, hospitals, disabled social care facilities, and high schools. I found an Indian study. They found 3 really big clusters, which is a pharmaceutical.
Okay, fuck. I'm supposed to drive to Tampa tonight, so I don't know if we'll do this one next time.
4
I'll do 5 minutes of this video.
years after COVID changed our world forever, the CIA confirmed what many suspected from the beginning. COVID escaped from a lab in Wuhan, China. For years, most intelligence agencies wouldn't touch that theory. Now most of them agree. But here's the real story. While they debated the origins, COVID killed tens of millions of people throughout the world, including my dad, and caused trillions of dollars in economic damage. The elephant in the room isn't just how COVID started. It's how different powerful groups work to keep you from knowing the truth. Scientists, the government, the mainstream media, the Chinese government, they weren't working together, but they all pushed the same false narrative. Anyone questioning the natural origins theory was a conspiracy theorist and probably a racist to boot. Hey, I'm Ken LaCourte. I spent a lot of hours digging into all of this to give you a decently complete, unfiltered breakdown of the coronavirus cover-up. In the next few minutes, we'll walk through the evidence pointing to a lab leak, how the scientific establishment tried to bury it, look at China's cover-up, how the media versus Trump politicized everything, and finally, how the truth bubbled out. Look, this is a horrible story of how our leaders and our institutions failed us. It's almost unbelievable. So first, let's look at the different theories that were considered at the beginning of COVID. The one we all heard is officially known as zoonotic transmission, that COVID was transmitted from a bat to a human, possibly at a wet market in Wuhan, China. But this theory had some obvious problems. The virus in bats and COVID in humans has a gap that suggests a missing link virus, which no one has ever found.
Which isn't necessarily a problem because this missing link wasn't found for SARS, correct, is what was said? The first one, right? We don't have the spillover event?
We'll get to that in a minute. There's also no evidence of a link between COVID and any specific animal at that market. It quickly, almost immediately, became apparent to anyone who looked into it that there were huge reasons to believe this virus had leaked from a Chinese lab.
None of those things. Just because you don't have the exact crossover event doesn't mean it must have come from a lab. That's an insane, or that you're not. It's just an uneducated statement to make. I don't know what else to say.
First, let's talk about the lab. The Wuhan Institute of Virology sits just across the Yangtze River from where the very first COVID cases emerged. It's a level 4 biohazard lab. Institute of Virology sits just across the Yangtze River from where the very first COVID cases emerged.
Okay, I don't know if this is like people who all live, no offense, but like in farms or in like the most redneck areas ever, or you maybe have never been to a city before, or you don't know what cities look like, or you don't know what buildings look like, or you don't know what people look like. But to say that this is right across these two places clearly have a lot of distance and a lot of people between them. That is an insane statement to make and to show this map, but okay.
Let's talk about the lab. The Wuhan Institute of Virology sits just across the Yangtze River from where the very first COVID cases emerged. It's a level 4 biohazard lab, the highest security rating, and they specialized in bat coronaviruses. They had the largest collection of bat virus samples in the world. But even before the lab opened, there were scientific concerns worldwide about its safety. U.S. State Department officials visited in 2018 and sent back alarming cables, warning about inadequate safety protocols and undertrained staff. These warnings specifically highlighted the risk of a SARS-like pandemic due to sloppy procedures. The lab's star researcher, Zhi Zengli, nicknamed the Bat Lady, she discovered the RATG13 6 years beforehand, a coronavirus sharing 96.2% of its genetic code with COVID-19. She found it in a mine many miles away where workers had died from a mysterious pneumonia years earlier. Despite that critical connection, she waited until after COVID's outbreak to reveal its existence.
Why? Like, do you see what I mean? How you can spin everything to support your theory? If it was the case that this might be like a common ancestor or it's what they worked on, why would she publish that? Why would you ever publish the RATG13 genome ever? You would just like, let's just go ahead and delete that one because it looks kind of bad for her. Why would she publish it after? It doesn't make any sense.
Yet in March 2019, months before the outbreak, Zhengli published a warning saying a SARS-like coronavirus outbreak from Chinese bats was highly likely. Now, her team wasn't just studying these viruses, they were creating hybrid versions capable of infecting human cells, testing how bat viruses might evolve to threaten humans.
Hold on. They published a paper about an experiment where they created a new hybrid bat coronaviruses by recombining the DNA of existing ones.
We're creating...
I don't know how nitpicky I want to be about this. Would you say that, recombining the DNA of existing ones, considering these are RNA viruses? I don't know how important. Maybe there are techniques that you use where you process the RNA with DNA and you use DNA to create recombinant viruses. Maybe. I don't know. Including at least one that was almost able to jump to humans. So the quote here that he has is saying something that's a bit different than what he's saying right now.
Hybrid versions capable of infecting human cells, testing how bat viruses might evolve to threaten humans. American taxpayers helped fund this research. The EcoHealth Alliance, led by Peter Daszak, channeled NIH grants to Wuhan for studying bat coronaviruses. This included gain-of-function research. Daszak channeled NIH grants to Wuhan for studying bat coronaviruses. This included gain-of-function research. Experiments that enhanced viruses to study their potential ability to infect humans. These were dangerous experiments, conducted in what they called BSL-2 conditions, far below recommended safety levels.
Recommended by who? Again, I can bring up the CDC site a million times. That's just not true. Number one. And number two, if he's vaguely alluding to the DEFUSE grant, we know that, for instance, that grant was shut. They didn't accept that grant, right? But
now, the timeline gets suspicious in late 2019, before the known outbreak. The lab suddenly removed its entire virus database, over 22,000 samples and sequences, without explanation. And China still refuses to restore access.
I just don't believe this is even true. I don't know what he's sourcing from. Neither person, neither Sar nor Yuri, brought this up in their debate. So this just sounds fake. Is there also what? Has nobody made copies of these databases? 22,000 genomic samples? It seems like it would be arbitrarily easy to just copy this, especially other institutions, I imagine, might even have their own copy.
To this day, satellite imagery showed increased in samples and sequences, without explanation. And China still refuses to restore access to this day. Satellite imagery showed increased hospital traffic nearby. Chinese officials ramped up, and China still refuses to restore access to this day.
I don't know what these dates are. Am I losing my mind? It says 10-10-18 and then 10-17-19. Is this? It's month, day, year. So this is October 10th, 2018. Or am I losing my mind? Am I having a stroke? And then this is October 17th, 2019.
Satellite imagery showed 1,000 samples and sequences, without explanation. And China still refuses to restore access to this day. Satellite imagery showed increased hospital traffic nearby. Chinese
from 1 year to the next. This is from 1 year to the next, though, right? He doesn't think it's just a week away, right? I don't know what else could have or maybe changed in a year or not. I have no idea. But
these officials ramped up biosafety protocols and began to restore access.
This is all. I'm probably not gonna enjoy watching any videos on this. Is gonna be my guess.
Increased hospital traffic nearby.
Because it's just gonna be all scientifically illiterate stuff, right? So if our evidence of the first case coming from that wet market is on December 16th, is I think what has been agreed on is December 16th. No, I'm so sorry. It's December 8th. Or was the 8th one December 16th? They thought it was the 8th, but it was 16th. Regardless if it was December 8th or December 16th, you're telling me that there were, if we're going by excess cases, that there are 300 or 400 cases in October, mid-October, at this hospital. There's just zero chance that this would have gone on for 2 months without there being hundreds of thousands of cases and deaths across China related to COVID. There's no way that this is just, it's impossible. It's just not possible. That virus database is back up. Chinese researchers have uploaded genetic sequences of coronaviruses to scientific database more than a year after they took them offline. Oh, so they did get taken. Okay, a batch of early coronavirus data that went missing for years emerged from hiding in June. And American scientists more than 200 genetic sequences from COVID-19 patient samples isolated in China early in the pandemic had puzzlingly been removed from an online database. Some sleuthing. He managed to track down 13 of the sequences in Google Cloud. Shared experience in a report online. He wrote that it seems likely the sequences were deleted because they existed, but now an odd explanation has emerged stemming from an editorial oversight by a scientific journal. And the sequences have been uploaded into a different database. Oh, this has to do with the 200. They talked about this. Never mind. This was okay. I don't know about the 100,000 deleted, but supposedly when you're doing research, there's embargoes, or there's you get some protectivity over sequences that you have before you've published your research, and you'll have a 4-year, or I think it said most commonly up to 2-year embargo, because you don't want to start working on a whole bunch of genomic sequences for some novel research, and then somebody comes and they scoop some novel sequence you've created to use as a backbone for more research, and now you get somebody publishes out from under you or whatever. I'm assuming if they're talking about that, the same thing, but the number is so similar, because it was 180 versus 200, and they say 200 here, so that's probably what that was. That's my guess, but. And I feel like if this would have been a strong piece of evidence, I feel like one of these guys would have brought it up. But.
Chinese officials ramped up biosafety protocols and began getting new safety equipment. According to later U.S. intelligence reports, in November 2019, 3 WIV researchers fell ill
There's this stupid shit.
with COVID-like symptoms, which sent them to the hospital. This was weeks before China reported.
Do you see what I mean when I say like a very small change in wording can significantly change how you feel about a thing? Like to go from reading the actual IC report where it says a bunch of people got sick, a lot of them like had confirmed illnesses that weren't COVID. A lot of the symptoms they had were also like consistent with like allergies and colds. One guy that was hospitalized for a totally non-respiratory related thing, right? To go from all of that to just summing it up as actually a bunch of people from the Wuhan Institute of Virology were sick in late 2019 from unspecified illness. Like it makes it sound like most people are sick from unspecified illnesses, right? Like the vast majority of people don't go to the hospital and get like cultures grown or whatever and samples taken for whatever disease they have, you know?
Reported its very first case. Now, the COVID virus has some unique features that raise questions. A special part called a furin cleavage site helps it more easily infect human cells, something the bat virus doesn't have. Usually, viruses like this spread from bats to other animals before reaching humans, with other similar bat virus doesn't have. Usually,
I don't even know what this, I don't even know what this chart is supposed to be.
viruses like this spread from bats to other animals before reaching humans. With other similar viruses like SARS and MERS, scientists quickly found spread from bats to other animals before reaching humans. With other similar viruses like SARS and MERS, scientists quickly found these middle step animals. But with COVID-19, even after lots of searching, they still haven't found that missing link. Probably because it doesn't exist. The early case pattern completely contradicts China's official story. While initial cases were linked to the Hunan market, later analysis revealed many early patients had no connection to the market at all, which suggests it wasn't the origin point, but rather an amplification site.
Oh, so like that's not true, right?
Analysis exists. The early case pattern completely contradicts China's official story. While initial cases were linked to the Hunan market, later analysis revealed many early patients had no connection to the market at all.
I don't think that's true at all, right? Of the first 5, I think 4 had a direct link and 1 was it roommates that somebody with? Well, I'll probably write these down very specifically, but...
Which suggests it wasn't the origin point, but rather an amplification site where the virus spread efficiently between humans. These aren't speculations or conspiracy theories. Each point is documented, each warning was logged, each timeline verified. The question isn't whether these facts exist, it's why so many people work so hard to keep us from knowing them. I'll put all of my resources and all of the background that I have on this down in the comments below. Scientists knew this was risky, but not only did the United States help...
Okay, this is retarded. All right. Maybe I might go over some of the videos like that later on. I'll probably write up a bit, like I've added a bunch to this note here. I'll probably try to do like a retard version. I shouldn't say that. Like a very layman's version, like an intermediate version, and then like an advanced version of these arguments. And I'll just like stick them in this note. I feel like this is probably a topic that I can debate endlessly because nobody will ever. I'll always be in a minority opinion on this. But testing your appearance on peers was excellent. Do you get any invites for debates against any dipshits like the ones on the panel? No, these people never invite for a debate. These guys are fucking retarded. I just did one. I thought it was a second peer show, but I mixed my bookers up on my phone. It was actually for that Al Ribia. I should remember the name of it. The Saudi Arabian one. It was me and Joey Manarino or something. I think I fucked his name up. But it was kind of boring. Not that there's anything bad about it, but it wasn't like we weren't screaming back and forth. It was just like answer. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think I'm gonna start driving to Tampa, and then I'm doing stuff tomorrow. Have fun. Be careful. Ripperino, cappuccino, 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 cappuccino. Al Pacino, my doing. So I gotta guess next. Streaming out. Be careful. Don't die. Actually, wait, we can do connections. Uber, Swan, Google, Love, Vile, Goose, Google, Foul, Zoom, Yahoo, Siren, Mean, Doodoo, Photoshop, Folk, Goof, Offal. These are like tech companies. No. One away. Google, Yahoo, Zoom, Uber. Wait, what? Swan, Love, Vile, Goose, Foul, Doodoo, Dodo. What the things you can use to search stuff? But no, that's things that are are not. Is it a homophone? Or like they have double meanings maybe? Like Yahoo and a Google is like a number. Uber like is a prefix. Maybe? Siren and Siren? Oh wait, that wasn't even one off. Wait, okay, so it's Zoom, Google, Yahoo, and Photoshop? Wait, it has to be these, it's 4 of these 5, right? Am I thinking about that correctly? Because this was one off. No, wait, this wasn't one off, and this was one off. Wait, did I guess 3? I don't even know.